Hey, we're the Doctors Who podcast, and on this episode, we will tackle Robert Jordan's Eye of the World, chapters 13 and 14. The troop has been on the road toward Tarvalin for almost a week when they came across the city of Baerlon. Baerlon is preparing for trouble, for at the city gate they learn of skirmishes in the area. As the travelers find refuge in the Stag and Lion Inn that evening, more stories of battle and the possibility of Aes Sedai in the city. As everyone but Tom retires for the evening, Rand drifts off to sleep and enters a lucid dream in which he encounters the Dark One, alzamon. Rand awakens suddenly and questions what the dream means. We'll dive deeper on our thoughts and reactions on these and more, coming right up.
Hello and welcome again to the Doctors Who podcast. My name is Chris.
My name is Chip.
My name is Brian.
As Brian told us in the intro, today we're talking about chapters 13 and 14 of The Wheel of Time. Or book one of The Wheel of Time, I guess. So, all right.
The Eye of the World.
That's the one, yes.
Yes.
Brian, I believe you had a correction that you noted from your intro. Did you want to redeem yourself?
So, of course, yes. So, thank you. I noticed after I listened to it there just a second ago that instead of Aes Sedai in the city, it's more plausible that there are White Cloaks in this city. Cloak members in the surrounding area for skirmishes, and it's possible, since they disbanded, that some of them could be among the city dwellers.
All right. Thank you. We have thus redeemed you, and why don't we jump to Chip for his take?
All right, so these chapters don't have as much action as what we talked about in the last episode, but there's still some action, but a lot more exposition and world building kind of happening here. So we do know that Moraine is teaching Egwene, and in the process of teaching, Rand starts to kind of eavesdrop because I don't know if he's jealous or what's going on here yet. But he overhears. I can't remember if he overhears this, but we hear it through their conversation. Moraine mentions having met another woman from the Two Rivers who can channel, in addition to Egwene. So we don't know who that is yet, but it's kind of interesting that for a small village that's kind of in the middle of nowhere, they've got these three boys who are, kind of targeted by the Dark One, and now there's two women that Moraine seems to have identified that can channel from there. So I found that pretty interesting. It's kind of fun when they do arrive at Baerlon and the Two Rivers folk. So, this is the biggest city they've ever seen. This is just completely crazy. We do get a lot more, kind of world building here, where we learn about the White Cloaks in the city. That they haven't really caused any trouble, but nobody really wants them there. The White Cloaks, for some reason, remind me of the Knights Templar from the Crusades and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
We also learn that we learn more about the man claiming to be the dragon reborn in Gildan. He also gets a name in this, set of chapters where he's Loghain, and his followers are the people of the dragon, and he's won another battle. And we learn about the prophecies of the dragon, or the Carathon cycle or something.
Yeah.
Carathon cycle. But basically we learn about the Stone of Tyr, and we learn about the sword that cannot be touched. There's just all this foreshadowing that's getting dropped left and right. They finally arrive at the Stag and Lion Inn, and we meet Min Farshaw for the first time. She's one of my favorite characters from the early books anyway. And then we have the whole dream sequence where, Rand comes face to face with the Dark One in the dream, and lots to unpack there. So.
All right. Brian.
Yeah. So I thought there was a lot that kind of happened, and I got a lot of this as like these star-eyed travelers who have never been outside their home before, and then we're going to go back home in about a month. And I thought that was about the funniest line in these two chapters. It was like, people are just not going to believe that we made it all the way out here when we return next month. And Egwene's like, guys, like, we just left home, and now you're just talking about going back home right away. You guys are ridiculous. But I liked the return to a familiar setting. Again, like, the tavern makes a lot of sense. I like that we got to see Tom kind of at the very end, he left and he went and did his thing. Like it just felt like a very natural fit for this party that's going through. And um, I think my favorite part in these two chapters was the dream sequence, and I can touch more on those later. But I thought there was so much, as Chip said, exposition here that for a first-time reader, there's a lot of information to digest. It took a couple reads through to kind of catch most of what I thought was important, but we'll see where it goes from here.
So one of the things I find kind of interesting is that Moraine vacillates between, like being understanding and explaining things and then just becoming extremely short-tempered with like questions or comments or something that somebody does. And as I was thinking about that, I'm like, this makes sense. She is used to being in places and positions where people are competent and they understand these larger world issues. And she's surrounded by these villagers who have never seen the outside of their particular territories. And it's got to be frustrating. It's like, I get it. I understand. So it just kind of struck me as I was reading that might be why that's happening. I also really liked that, we do get to see more of like, that as they're traveling, like Lan is like going out ahead and scouting and coming back and reporting or dropping off to the east of the, he's all over the place and he's checking things and he's making sure that there's nothing on their tail. So it like that part of kind of this journey is kind of interesting to me. Again, one of my favorite characters in the series, so it's kind of cool just to pick up the first book and read through some of these early details of him. I find it kind of odd that Rand thought it was a good idea to spy on an Aes Sedai and Egwene. That doesn't seem smart, but he doesn't seem to do intelligent things sometimes, so I guess I shouldn't be too shocked. And then lastly, I am going to touch on the dream sequence. There's a lot there. There's some interesting things that are packed into it, and I'm going to get into some details here in a little bit. But yeah, I'm glad, Brian, that it was easier than the last one, and that you found it worthwhile and not, oh my god, another dream sequence. So yeah. All right. What first, guys?
Ooh.
Where do we jump in?
Well,
I don't know. Go ahead, Brian.
One other line that I thought was really funny, and I should probably pull the actual quote up, but at one point they opened up the map and they're like, well, where do we want to go? And I want to say, like, Matt said, how about if we go to Ilion? And they're like, why do you want to go to Ilion? Because there are no Aes Sedai there. And then, like,
Moraine's
right
there.
at that moment, Moraine walks in, right? Like, poor choice of words. But I just like the little bits of humor in there that kind of lighten the mood or make it easier to kind of associate yourself with the characters, because if a character is serious all the time, it's hard to really relate. So I thought they were more relatable, at least for me, in that scene.
One of the things I didn't touch on, when they get to Baerlon, Lan and Moraine take on identities,
Alias.
like
Yeah.
Master Andra
Lady
and Lady
Amos
Astra or something like that.
Alice?
Alice. It's
I can't
Alice.
remember.
Yes.
Alice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just like, like obviously they have some familiarity with the innkeeper and the inn they're staying. Probably paid him a lot of gold to make sure that they're taken care of whenever they show up. But that inn was actually a great place for some good world building and exposition as well. Because you get, let's see, you hear a little bit more about like I think Chip, you said how things go in Ghealdan, Loghain. Let's see.
They learn about the White Cloaks.
Yeah, more about the White Cloaks,
Mm-hmm.
and absolutely agree that it reminds kind of like the Templars. Just that single-mindedness.
They're there to bring you to the light, and they're basically on a crusade to save all these people, but they really have no like kingly authority or any true authority other than just bullying people, do they? I mean, from what I remember of the books, it's just they're just kind of this group that runs around and tries to save people. The thing I like too is in the inn when it's kind of the bath scene when all the guys are in the tubs and they start kind of talking to the guy that's kind of managing the room or whatever, and Matt starts to talk about the Trollocs, and Lan is quick to shut him up and tell him, what does he Lan says something there about how I don't trust anyone outside of Tarvalon and only half of the people in Tarvalon, which it kind of begs the question. It's like, okay, so there's Aes Sedai that he doesn't trust. Yeah. So what's going on there? There's it just is another good, just a quick little thing to say. Yeah, Tarvalon may not be as great a place as you think you're going to.
But even before Lan got there and reprimanded him, like Matt started saying something and Tom was basically like covering it up by saying, please, we're sick of hearing your stories, and the rest of them are like, you never tell it as good as Tom, you always add extra things in there. So yeah but it was, man, there's just something about the way Jordan describes that inn that makes it seem warm and comforting, right?
Yeah, you kind of want to just go hang out there.
Yeah, exactly. So I appreciate, because you're like, you got these huge copper tubs and you've got a private dining room. I mean, I think at the end of the chapter they find out like the beds aren't the best because the innkeeper's like, all these people have come and I don't have any room, but I'll give you what I can. And this brings up something else too, because the very first chapter 1 after the prologue, when Tam and Rand are walking into town, it talks about how the winter's been long and spring's not coming and the crops aren't growing and the wolves have come down. And basically saying, like, I think it's like miners and smelters have all come into town to escape this really overly harsh winter, and they've filled up the inns. So this is like global. This wasn't just isolated to the Emond's Field area. It's affecting everything. So just drawing some
that's a good point.
Parallels there.
Another thing I liked in this chapter is when Moraine is teaching Egwene, and she's talking about the different aspects of the One Power, but she also does some interesting things where she's just talking kind of about the balance, where the Aes Sedai symbol is kind of the old yin yang symbol, but she talks about the male channelers and the female channelers, kind of good and evil. There's kindness and cruelty, and it really just kind of all these things that kind of show that balance that that symbol kind of represents.
Yeah, and we get a little bit of insight as to how the power works, right? Because much like we found with Sanderson, there's a mechanic here. It's broken down into basically Captain Planet, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking of the elementals, but
because you have fire and water.
Well, you've got earth, wind, and fire. Yeah, they were pretty good.
They
in the
were.
70s,
Yeah.
That's true. Water and spirit. I don't remember them, but
they were the opening act.
But
yeah, that's probably true.
But again, it's little bits of information sprinkled organically into the dialogue, so it doesn't feel like a massive info dump. You're catching bits of information as you need to know them, and you're learning alongside of Rand and Matt and Perrin and Egwene. So that
a lot of fun with foreshadowing. So.
Yeah. Let's see. There was one section, because I grumbled about this at the end of the last episode, about Rand's reaction to Egwene potentially being an Aes Sedai. But they're actually arguing here, and let's see.
Did she call him a wool-headed
Well,
something or other?
maybe. So she was saying that she would be an Aes Sedai as soon as she reached Tarvalon. He snorted. As soon as you reach Tarvalon, why? Light, tell me that. You're no dark friend. And she says, do you think Moraine Sedai is a dark friend? Do you? After she saved the village, after she saved your father? And he says, I don't know what she is, but whatever she is, she doesn't say anything about the rest of them. The stories, and then this is my favorite line right here, because I am the same way. Grow up, Rand, forget the stories and use your eyes. It's like, yes, yes, let's stop using the stories as this crutch that we keep leaning on. So that was just like one moment where I was like, yes. So I wanted to at least bring that up.
Yeah, it's still like that distrust of Egwene, though, or Egwene. It just doesn't seem like it's really founded in reality, as you said. It's just kind of a notion that he's somehow fabricated, or like he's not. His problem isn't necessarily just with Moraine. I think it partially is, but it's also with Egwene as well.
And I don't know if it's kind of a plot device too, that as this story really is Rand's story, and all these other players around him as he kind of grows and learns. But is it just kind of the immaturity of Rand at this age and where he came from, and just kind of,
I think so.
He's got so much to learn that
Mm-hmm.
starting him at this point gives him a lot more room to grow and develop. And I don't know, maybe not, but
Yeah, I can see that.
because all the boys, Perrin's the only one that really seems level-headed and pretty mature for his age, because Matt's very immature, goofs off, and but he has his own story arc where he comes into his own down the road and grows into something other than just a prankster and jokester who likes to dice, and anyway, so
Yeah, I agree there.
Yeah.
Should we talk about the dream a little bit?
Yes.
yeah.
So I had a question on the dream, because it kind of opens up and he's in like these stone hallways. And at first I was like, oh, maybe he's dreaming about the palace that Lews Therin was in at the beginning in the prologue.
Mm-hmm.
And then as it started to talk about it more, I'm like, oh, maybe this is the Stone of Tyr. But I don't think it definitively said, or it didn't definitively give us any idea. But I was just I was trying to figure out if he was like, because the first dream I think he ended up in Tarvalon. He dreamed he was there, chasing the White Tower.
Couldn't get away from the White Tower.
Yeah, and so I was like, okay, well, what is this one? Because Tom was telling him about the prophecies of the dragon and how the dragon has to take the stone.
Yeah, because that was the scene right before this, wasn't it, with the Stone of Tyr?
Yeah.
And the sword that cannot be touched.
Yep.
So it could be the Stone of Tyr.
Yeah.
I like, this is really our first callback to the prologue. With Lews Therin and Tuck, when the Dark One basically says, I was there with Lews Therin when he went nuts and killed everybody he loved, and
I told him to do it.
That is the prologue.
Yeah.
And that is the prologue. So.
Well, but he says a lot more than that.
Oh, I know.
He said, because just by rote, everybody says, you and all the Forsaken are bound by the Creator until the end of time in Shai'l Ghul. And he said, I've never been bound. I did this thing with Lews Therin. 1,000 years later, I sent the Trollocs ravening south. Then the Covenant of the 10 Nations was shattered beyond remaking. And then I whispered in Artur Hawkwing's ear. And then I did this thing when the Aes Sedai died. And then it's like he's saying, like, yeah, you think I've been bound, but I did all these things. I have been pulling the strings on world events since the breaking of the world.
This is our first mention of Artur Hawkwing, isn't it? And,
yeah.
Some of his stories become important down the road, too. So, there's all these like little threads that all of a sudden, it's really kind of plot points, and then all of a sudden the threads start to connect, and it's like, oh, that's why he's important. So.
Yeah. But I mean, this was good because I think it tells the reader a couple of things. The Dark One doesn't know for sure which of the three he's after. Because he says, "Are you the one?"
Yep.
So, safe to say that Perrin and Matt are probably also having the same dream. He also talks to him about the Aes Sedai and how they're going to use him, and then he drops a bunch of names. Davian, Urian Stonebow, Guar, Amalsan, Rael, Darksbane. He drops all these names. Brian, I hope you forgive me, but those are all the names of previous false dragons that have been around since the breaking.
Well, and he mentions that his father was chosen by the White Tower and that his mother was no more than a broodmare, if I remember right.
Yep.
And that's when he says, the Amerlin seat's going to use you until you're consumed. He's basically just telling him this is the fate that you have in this role.
Yep. Fun stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole bit with the rat.
Yep.
At the very end, where he just crooks his finger and he breaks the rat's back, which causes Rand to wake up. But yeah.
So one thing I had on this that because I saw the name, he called himself Alzamon, which I had heard the name Baal from somewhere before, and I was like, where was that? Oh, it's from the Old Testament.
It's a biblical name.
Yes. So Baal was an old Palestinian god, I believe, and he ended up being in the Old Testament. He was portrayed as the Duke of Hell, I believe. Often his signature look came in many different forms, but one of which is a toad, and it kind of harkened back to the quote where he said, essentially he said, "Rand, you are no more a toad by a field pond." Something along those lines. And I'm like, I wonder if that was intentional.
Interesting.
But it was.
Reading Jordan, I'm sure it probably was. But...
That's true, yeah.
But I just thought all of the, he apparently leads a dark army in the Old Testament. There are a lot of parallels between the two. I just thought it was a really interesting name choice. And I'm sure, as you said, not just coincidental. It was probably intentional. And yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so next time we continue our adventures in Baerlon. Will Rand talk to Moraine about the dream? It kind of seems like he should.
But we know he doesn't make great decisions right now.
Yeah, his decision making is not stellar. So, okay, yeah. Next time, chapters 15 and 16. And as always, please use the comment section. Join in the conversation. Tell us what you liked and didn't like. If you did like the video, please hit the like button, that little thumbs up guy. We appreciate that. We also invite you to subscribe and hit the bell notification so that when we post new content, you know about it. We will be back next Thursday with the next installment of The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. And until then...